Okay, thank you everyone and welcome. Today we are joined by our two guests, the newly announced chair of the high-level expert group on net zero emissions commitments of non-state entities, Mckenna, and the Secretary General's Special Advisor on Climate Action, Selwin Hart. They will have brief introductory remarks and then we'll have some time for Q&A. Please.
Great, thanks. It's a real privilege to accept the Secretary General's invitation to chair a group of experts on a vitally important issue at a very vitally important time for climate action. Chairing the Secretary General's high-level expert group on net zero commitments of non-state entities, quite a sexy title if I don't say so myself, is extremely important. The Secretary General has been clear that we have a crucial need for stronger and clearer standards and criteria for net zero commitments by everyone from businesses to investors to cities in regions. As the Secretary General said at COP26, we have a deficit of credibility and delivery and a surplus of confusion. And let's be clear, while it's great to see an avalanche of net zero pledges, they aren't a get out of jail free card. You need to do the work to deliver real, ambitious and immediate emissions reductions in a transparent and verifiable way. I'm very excited to be working with a great group of experts, as well as with the UN Climate Action Team, ably led by Selwin Hart, my good friend, the Special Advisor to the Secretary General on Climate Action. Much has changed in just these past 4 months, but the need identified by the Secretary General at COP26 is more pressing than ever. This is a make or break moment. The decisions and actions that the world takes now will decide whether or not we have a chance to limit warming to 1.5 degrees and ensure a sustainable planet for future generations. The evidence continues to mount. Emissions continue to rise. The climate crisis is getting worse with real impacts on people's lives and livelihoods around the world. And the role of non-state actors, whether corporations, investors, cities, or regions, is more crucial than ever. We need every pledge backed up by robust, credible delivery plans so that they are implemented in full as quickly as possible. That is ultimately what this expert group is about. Just as the world's responses to climate must be based on science, I warmly welcome the Secretary General's decision to engage experts across all key disciplines needed to fulfill the group's mandate to take action to raise ambition and environmental integrity across 4 areas. 1, current standards and definitions for setting net zero targets. 2, credibility criteria used to assess the objectives, measurement, and reporting of net zero pledges. 3, processes for verifying progress towards net zero commitments and decarbonization plans. 4, a roadmap to translate standards and criteria into international and national regulations. The 15 other colleagues that make up the expert group are deeply respected for their breadth and depth of experience, knowledge and insight, their independence and impartiality, and their proven records in fields from science to academia to government to civil society to business. It is an honor, to say the least, to be chairing this group, and I look forward to getting started with my colleagues in the period immediately ahead. Of course, we certainly don't have or claim to have a monopoly on insights and perspectives on this complex issue, and so I look forward to the many consultations we will hold in the months ahead. Reflecting also on my own work now and in the past, I'm also proud to be chairing a group that is gender balanced. That was personally important to me, as women have long been leading the way on climate action, and they need to be at the table. It's also critically important to have representation from regions around the world. I want to thank again the Secretary General for this vital initiative and for his trust in me and for my colleagues in this group. We will work tirelessly to fulfill our mandate, because that is what the gravity of the climate crisis urgently requires.
Thank you. Selwin, please.
Thank you so much, and Madam Chair, welcome on board. More than ever, we need your leadership. You're a proven climate leader. We've worked together in many different capacities, and we're really excited about the work that you and the 15 other members of this group will do over the course of the next few months. I'll be very brief because we want to get to your questions, and I know there's lots of interest in this initiative, and rightfully so. As Madam Chair, as Catherine just said, we've witnessed this avalanche of net zero pledges from businesses, investors, cities, regions over the course of the last few years. Certainly, since the Paris Agreement was finalized in 2015, and this is welcome. However, setting a common destination is an important first step, but as the Secretary General has said repeatedly, pledging net zero, that's the easy part. The hard part is doing the work to get there. And the fact is that pledges alone do not lower emissions, and we must all go from rhetoric to reality. And quite frankly, when one looks at the current climate landscape, we seem to be going backwards on climate action. Emissions rebounded to their highest level in history just last year, and they're still rising. As we've seen from recent reports from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, more than half of humanity is already in the danger zone, and you're 15 times more likely to die from climate impacts if you are from a vulnerable region. And ironically, it's these regions and countries that have contributed least to the climate crisis. And we're also seeing policy responses from many major economies where they're doubling down on the production and use of fossil fuels. And as the Secretary General has said, this leaves whole economies at the mercy of geopolitical shocks of the sort we're seeing now, that we're seeing now. So it is in this context that the work of this expert group is extremely vital. And as the Secretary General has also said, governments have the lion's share of responsibility to achieve net zero emissions by mid-century, especially the G20 countries. But we also urgently need every business, every investor, city, state, and region to walk the talk, as Madam Chair just said earlier, on net zero promises. And to avert a climate catastrophe, exactly where we're heading now, we need both pledges matched by concrete actions, and tougher net zero standards and strengthened accountability around the implementation of these commitments will deliver and can deliver real and immediate emission cuts where we desperately need them now. I would note that the purpose of this group is not to monitor individual companies or cities or have an enforcement function. Nevertheless, the group is, and the work of the group will be essential in helping to deliver stronger and much clearer standards for net zero pledges that apply equally across all non-state actors, as well as helping them to speed up the implementation of these pledges and commitments so that we can see the rapid and sustained emission reductions that the atmosphere so desperately needs to keep our global climate goals, especially the 1.5 degree goal, within reach. So the full terms of reference of the group, its membership, they've all been sent to all of you, and I wouldn't repeat them here, but just invite any questions from colleagues who are here.
Thank you very much. We'll now turn it over for questions. Are there any questions in the room? If not, I'm going to turn to the chat, to the colleagues online. Yes, Frank Jordan's from the AP.
Hello, I hope you can hear me all right.
Yes, we can hear you.
I'd like to ask both the panelists whether you'll be naming and shaming any of the most egregious examples of greenwashing. And the SG has said that governments obviously bear the lion's share of responsibility. So will your recommendations apply to governments too? And if not, why not?
Do you want to start?
So as I just said, we will not be naming and shaming individual companies who have made, or financial institutions that have made these commitments. The work of this group really is to ensure that the standards are clear, that we have clear standards and definitions around setting net zero targets. As you know, there are different standards and definitions that apply to many of the existing commitments, and there needs to be some standardization, as well as the credibility criteria related to many of these pledges. There are different frameworks and processes for verifying progress towards these commitments, and this is a massive gap. For example, many of the pledges that have been made, net zero by 2050, don't have interim targets. Now, under no circumstances can that be seen as a credible commitment to net zero, when we know that in order to be on a net zero by 2050 pathway, it means globally that emissions will need to be reduced by at least 45% below 2010 levels by 2030. So, to pass the credibility test, there must be the expectation that those making these pledges have credible interim targets. And to answer your last question, there are processes in the Paris Agreement around measuring, reporting, and verifying the pledges and commitments, or the nationally determined contributions of member states. And we're now in a phase of implementation around assessing the nationally determined contributions of member states. But there is this surplus of confusion, as we all agree, around the pledges from these non-state actors, and that is what the work of this group will really be focused on. However, the fourth element of the terms of reference of this group speaks about a pathway from voluntary commitment setting to potentially national and international regulations. And this piece of the work of this group will definitely apply to governments. But we're not here to preempt what Catherine, Ms. Mckenna, and her group will do over the course of the next few months. But it's really fantastic work that needs to be done now.
Maybe So, I mean, I understand the concern because there are just so many net zero pledges and so many different bodies and organizations. And we do need to bring coherence. I mean, you can start with the very basic thing. What is net zero? We need businesses, investors, we need cities and regions to actually be doing the hard work themselves. I'm someone who cares greatly about markets, so certainly offsets, carbon removal are important, but we need to see real, credible, verifiable action in the short term, doing the hard work. I think it is important, though, that there's transparency because I guess sunlight is the best disinfectant. And so there will be an ability to actually measure how are folks doing? Do they have robust targets? Are they actually monitoring them, verifying them in a transparent way? Are they being ambitious? In terms of the bringing this into, the state level, which of course is important because the Paris Agreement is an agreement among states. There is a couple things. One, there is, as Selwin pointed out, the goal is to have a roadmap where you would translate standards and criteria into international and national regulations. That's part clearly of the mandate, which I think is important, looking to best practices in different countries that can be adopted by others. And then there is a view that this might be able to be brought in, the work of this group could be brought into the stock take that's done, country stock takes. Overall, maybe not this year, but the following year. Although the Secretary General has a very ambitious timeline, so the goal is to report. The goal is to report at the end of this year.
Thank you both. Are there any other questions here in the room or online? If so, you can just open up your mic.
Yes, I have a question, please.
Hi, yes, can you please state your name and media? Oh, hi. Go ahead.
Yes, my name is Oscar Bolaños, and I want to say thank you for this briefing on climate actions. And my question is, on these recommendations to governments on actions for climate change, do you think it's important to have in the implementation of education on climate change in schools and teachers to teach about climate change? Because we know that the climate change has different effects and why it's happening, and everything starts from each one of the households and the way how we consume and how we recycle and all this. And to have this education as a part of, as an assignment in education for the new generation on these regards. Thank you.
I can just answer that while that is beyond the mandate that we've been given, I think that's critically important, because right now we are seeing a lot of disinformation and misinformation. I'm speaking for myself, but I think most people who work in the climate space would agree, and that the way that you can combat that is actually teaching young people the science. Although I would say young people tend to be leading the way and expecting even more ambitious ambition from folks like us and also from non-state actors as well as from governments. But I think it's critically important. We need to be doing more on the education front. We need to be doing more talking like real people talk. We need to reach out through networks, whether it's through schools or through faith groups, or in a whole variety of different ways, because it's critically important that folks realize just the crisis we are in, the climate crisis, and also the actions we need to take. We just do not have time. We need to be acting now if we have any hope of staying well below 2 degrees and staying at 1.5, below 1.5.
Okay, Selwin, would you like to add anything? Mr. Hart? No? Okay, we're good. Any other questions online? Now's the time.
Oh, hello, Joe Lowe from Climate Home News here. I'd just like to ask if Scope 3 emissions are kind of going to be included in the discussions, or if that is something that Catherine has a view on.
I have to be a bit careful because I don't want to get ahead of the working group, but my view is yes. But the reality is, I mean, look at what are we tasked with doing? I mean, first of all, is actually see what's out there. There are so many different net zero pledges, standards, groups you can join. And I think we need to look at that. Many of them do cover Scope 3. But of course, Scope 3 is critical. And so I think we need to look across the board, look at where there's the real credible standards, ways that you can help businesses. And I'll say, like, look, whether it's businesses or investors or cities or regions, I think most folks want to do the right thing. And it only supports them by having very credible standards that they can be measured against and measured against their peers, because there are some folks who want to greenwash. So the more that we can have robust standards, clear standards, including, I believe, Scope 3, the more that we're going to be able to be ambitious on climate action and reach the goal of 1.5 degrees.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? Okay. Well, thank you very much. And Ms. Mckenna, we wish you all the best, and all the best to the group as well. Thank you.